Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can check out new episodes of the show every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m. If you missed an episode or want to get more information about the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Tom Martin. He's the founder at LawDroid and co-founder at Vancouver Legal Hackers. Tom, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kevin. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. You have kind of a really interesting kind of take on kind of the legal space, but maybe before we kind of get into that, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Sure. So I'm originally from Los Angeles.
Okay.
I grew up on the east side of LA in a part called El Sereno, which is a older part of LA outside of downtown. And, went to school in the San Gabriel Valley.
Nice. It's a nice area, though. Spent some time in LA or that area.
Yeah, it's a nice area. It was nicer when I was younger. It's a very hilly area, so you have like back when I was a kid, there's still like raccoons and a lot of wildlife and stuff that was kept it kind of feeling like more of the suburb and not so much part of the city. But that's changed quite a bit since then.
Sure.
And one other thing is that, it's definitely, East LA is kind of the other side of the tracks to where I would go to school. And so I don't know if you're familiar with John Hughes or his movies, but it was kind of that feel, going to high school like in Locking Out of Flint Ridge, which is a very like upscale area where they have country clubs and horses and things like that, golf,
Sure. So you've been to a bunch of kind of universities kind of across the country. Walk me through your kind of university career.
Sure. So the first stop was I went to school back east in Connecticut. I went to Yale University.
Okay.
And got a degree in philosophy.
So what made you want to take that?
Yale or the philosophy?
Philosophy. Well, I guess kind of both. What made you want to take philosophy at Yale? Well, that's probably a stupid question because like Yale's a huge, popular, world-renowned university, so I get that. But what got you into philosophy and wanting to go to Yale?
Sure. Well, when I was in high school, I was always, and I don't know if this is kind of different now, but at the time I was a very reflective kid. I read a lot in terms of science and like theoretical physics and stuff. Not that I totally understood everything, okay,
Sure.
but like that kind of stuff really made me think a lot about like the nature of things. And not to get too nerdy about it, but that kind of point of view was where I was at then.
Interesting.
And I really wanted to explore it. And so, I went and looked at a few different universities, and Yale just really hit a chord with me. There was something about the energy of the place. There's a very high level of engagement with all the students. They're extremely bright, involved kids.
Sure.
And then the aesthetic of the campus is a kind of a gothic kind of feel to it.
I've seen photos. I've never been, but it looks like a rad campus.
Yeah. And so it all just struck a chord with me, and it seemed to fit together.
Sure.
So that's why I ended up doing that.
Okay, and then you went back to California for your law degree. What made you go kind of back to UCLA?
Well, UCLA was coming back home to LA.
Sure.
My family is in LA, and I'd been away for a while, and I thought I'd set down my roots.
Gotcha.
In LA.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, and then once you left university, you've kind of worked all over the States. Kind of walk me through your post-university career before kind of you got into kind of LawDroid and kind of all the other things you're involved in right now.
Yeah, sure. I I had I guess, an atypical type of, um, employment history
Sure.
after getting out of law school when you compare it to, I guess, what people traditionally do. The first thing I did when I got out of law school is, because I was in Los Angeles and I loved movies and the entertainment business, I actually first went into that. So I
Okay.
worked, um, for a movie producer named John Peters.
Okay.
Yeah, he has,
That's
or he
rad.
had, yeah, he had a production company in Burbank on the Warner Brothers lot, and there was some really great access to some amazing people that I got to meet. And then I ended up working at United Talent Agency, um, as an agent trainee with, working under Jeremy Zimmer,
Okay.
uh, who's now the, CEO of UTA, which is a powerhouse talent agency. And I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, Swimming with Sharks.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it is a very high pressure industry,
Sure.
and there's a lot of great like life lessons that I learned from working at an agency, and that kind of high pressure business is very demanding, and it makes you, um, really take things to heart, not take no for an answer, and really follow your goals.
No, I think that's great. So, what made you kind of decide to found LawDroid, and what exactly is it?
So LawDroid is, it's an AI legal assistant that helps business owners incorporate their business, and they could do it themselves by answering a few questions with this chatbot, because that's what it is. It's a chatbot where you answer questions in a dialogue, and you could incorporate your business in California.
Okay. No, I think that's actually really cool, right? And I think kind of innovative because you're almost taking work away from yourself, correct? By building this little chat bot, right? To basically do kind of pretty well, simple is maybe the wrong word, but kind of these like most people just need like when they're incorporating a business, they don't really need anything crazy. They just kind of need like you just open up the template, change the name, fire it off, and they're good to go. Correct?
Yeah, filling out the form is part of it, but there's also the cool thing about chatbots is that you can also pack in some automated guidance.
Okay.
So like, it's not just form filling, but it's also telling you, if you're even a good match for this form.
Oh, interesting.
Like, does this service make sense for you? So LawDroid goes through and it asks you a few questions that a lawyer would normally ask you to kind of disqualify you. Like, maybe this isn't the right thing for you.
Oh, interesting.
And then once you are qualified and you fit, okay, this particular way of incorporating makes sense for this person, then it goes through and informs the user, hey, these are all the things you need to know about, as consequences of incorporating like this.
Gotcha.
Like, you're going to have to pay a minimum franchise tax fee every year of $800 is one of them.
Okay.
And so the cool thing about chatbots is that you could put those two things together: the document generation with, guidance on how to fill it out and what it means.
No, I think that's great. So, kind of walk me through kind of the process. Like, I download the app and then I can, I just kind of answer the questions, or is it a little bit more complicated than that? And can I do it from the web as well?
So right now it's, currently on Facebook Messenger,
Okay.
and so it's going to be available on other platforms like Skype and Slack and, WeChat and others.
Yeah.
But but the first one I started off on is Facebook Messenger, just because we have 1.2 billion monthly active users, and it seemed like a good platform to start on.
Sure.
Um, but all you do is you hop into Messenger, answer a few questions, and the whole thing probably takes about 10 minutes. And at the end of it, it emails you your form, and you just print it out, sign it, and mail it in. Now, if you didn't want to do that yourself and have me do it, then you just you know, you can opt into doing that for a small fee.
Sure. So what is the cost to use LawDroid?
So there's one thing that's impossible to get around, and that's the state filing fee, which is $100 in
Okay.
California.
Sure.
But other than that, it is possible to go through LawDroid and actually get the whole service for free.
Okay.
That's if you do it yourself completely, where you print it out, you sign it, and mail it in. That's actually free.
Okay.
But there's a number of opportunities when you fill it out where you can opt into additional services.
I got you.
Like, yeah, like I file it for you, um, or if you choose to have LawDroid be your registered agent for service of process, which is the person who receives paperwork for the company, then that's a fee that is an annual recurring fee. Or if you want to get some legal advice, you can pay to have a 30-minute consult with a lawyer.
Sure. I think that's great. Like I love what you're doing with the whole kind of, you're basically bringing technology into a space that's not known for having technology, right? Like any kind of experience I've had kind of with a lawyer in the past, I don't mean it mean, it's usually just like they might send you like a Word doc or a PDF, right? And it's just kind of like you get on the phone with them or you go meet them in person, and there's not really any technology or kind of modern technology in the space, right? And I think there's huge opportunity for like obviously for what you're doing and kind of taking that forward, right? And kind of pushing your guys' industry a little bit more kind of modern.
Yeah, definitely. I think if somebody were to invent the profession of providing legal services now,
Mm-hmm.
um, it would definitely not look the way it does. Like you wouldn't have lawyers sitting in high-rise offices with marble floors and you having to, like you as the client having to plan your entire day and business and everything around the lawyer schedule. And like the way the current system is that the lawyer is the center of the universe, and the client has to find their way around the lawyer's time
Got you.
and all that. And the way things should be, and the way they are in pretty much every other service industry, is the other way around. It rotates around the customer, and that's fundamentally the shift that's happening. Is to build a client-centered approach for providing legal services, and something that just feels natural to everyone, which is we live on our phones, we message all of our friends and family all the time,
Yeah, sure.
and to have something where we live that's just as easy to communicate with, like a chatbot, for example, and to be able to, whenever you need it, on demand, 24/7, get some vital information that you need, or to get some legal services done on the fly, is just going to be the new normal,
Sure.
fairly quickly.
Well, and I also think though, just like to your point earlier, is where I can do everything kind of myself for free, but throughout the process, I can kind of get help or consultation, or I can like set up a meeting or call or whatever with you, right? I think like people, I think sometimes people are kind of unsure about what they need, and I would put myself in that boat. Like I'm a creative person. Like the legal stuff has kind of always been so foreign to me. So sometimes I'll take a crack at something, but then at some point I'm like, you know what? Like I want to, call Tom quickly, right? And get his opinion on this that's relevant to me, right? But I might at
Hmm.
least start off the process kind of on my own. But it's an interesting kind of space that you're playing in, and I think you're kind of at the beginning of the whole thing, at least from like technology being put into the legal space. I know there's tons of sites online that kind of you can download a templated document of for whatever, but I think actually being able to kind of build this stuff on the fly, and incorporate a business, and kind of whether I use a lawyer throughout the process or do it myself through kind of your LawDroid, I think that's actually really cool and really innovative.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean this particular thing has been a thread that's run through my legal career, which is making legal services available to regular people.
Sure.
Like to make legal services accessible and affordable. The big buzzword in the legal industry is access to justice.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and access to justice, which I'm also a part of a group called Group Legal Services Association,
Okay.
which is affiliated with the American Bar Association, and its mission is to advance access to legal services and make them affordable. So um, the whole point is that it shouldn't be about the people with the people that have the most money win, or the people with the most money are the only ones that have access to lawyers and to legal services, but regular people that don't have the budgets for it, how are they going to be served? And historically, they've been underserved or not served at all.
Sure.
And so these kinds of automated legal service systems are going to be able to provide a type of legal information, simple services, and advice to most people that couldn't afford it.
Sure.
And I think it's a great access point for them to get involved in the system that they haven't to date really been able to get active in.
No, I love that. And I think the thing that's interesting to me about what you guys are doing is like the whole startup culture is kind of super trendy right now, and I don't mean that in a mean way. I'm part of that. Like I work on other stuff in the day. So but I think part of it is like a lot of people, especially when they're doing a startup, whether it's themselves or with a co-founder or a few founders, having kind of a legal documentation and everything kind of set up early on is super important. And I think, just even incorporating your business and whatnot is super important. But it traditionally it's been so expensive that it's just not worth it when it's like, you and a buddy just like spending your evenings and weekends hacking out a little web project that you're like, maybe we'll turn this into a startup one day, right? Like, but when somebody like yourself is kind of lowering the barrier of entry to actually getting, your kind of legal stuff in order sooner than later is only beneficial for everybody kind of involved.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do, is to make it so that any entrepreneur, business owner who wants to incorporate, who wants to formalize their business, so they can get their, a corporate bank account set up, start being, um, keeping their books as a corporation, to some extent having additional credibility because they're incorporated,
Sure.
like that. They could do all of that. They don't have to worry about saving up the 2 grand or 3 grand that it's going to cost to retain a lawyer to be able to do that, and to make it something that is not going to be a bottleneck to
Got you.
their progress.
No, I think that's great. So for people that don't fully understand, how does it work? Like if I don't live in California, can I incorporate my business in California or any other state? Or how does that kind of work?
So two things. I mean, number one, anyone can incorporate in California.
Okay. Whether do
You
you have
don't.
to be an American citizen?
No, you don't.
Okay, interesting.
Uh, but but I'm not saying that you should do that. I'm saying you
Okay.
can do. I'm
Got
saying
you.
you can do, like, if you live in Texas, you can incorporate in California. It might not be the best idea,
Okay.
because if you're actually conducting your business in Texas, for example, then you would have to pay Texas your a corporation tax in addition to California. So you're kind of like shooting
Double
yourself in the
paying.
foot.
Got you.
So for California, it's basically for California residents who are conducting the business here and they want to incorporate.
Okay.
Um, the plan is to expand into additional states so that the next one logically would likely be Delaware
Okay.
and others.
Is
But
Delaware, because like I've kind of heard, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on this. Like I know Y Combinator and some other kind of big kind of incubators tell everybody to incorporate their startup in Delaware. Do you agree with that? What's your thoughts on that?
so like most legal questions, it's highly fact specific. So it
Okay.
depends. It depends on what the people are trying to accomplish. Like the people that are trying to form this corporation, what are their goals? And if their goals are just to, run a restaurant, for example, in California,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to incorporate so that if somebody slips and falls in the restaurant, they're not going to lose their entire life savings,
Sure.
then a California corporation makes sense. Like you don't have to do Delaware.
Right. Right.
But if you have um, a startup and you have your technical co-founder and marketing people, and it's a tech startup,
Yeah.
then yeah, you probably want to consider Delaware because it's it's something that's expected, and when investors go into it, they know what to expect.
Okay.
Um, and it's that's a fairly typical setup for that kind of startup. But
Gotcha.
there's many, the vast majority of which are not the Silicon Valley startups,
Sure.
which are just mom and pop stores or just entrepreneurs that are not doing tech that are looking to get their businesses started. And so what I'm doing right now is kind of geared more towards them
Okay.
because
Gotcha.
incorporating in California, this particular niche is a little more local. Um, but I think that there's also a large market to be captured for those that are doing startups, and even beyond the tech startup. Um, there's a lot of other companies that consider Delaware simply because Delaware has a very large body of law that's dedicated to you know corporate litigation and how corporations work, and it's much more developed than a lot of states.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting. I didn't really like I've always heard that, but I didn't really realize why until now, I guess. So, I
yeah,
it's interesting, right? Because it's funny how like just different states are just so wildly different with something well, I guess law is complicated, but it's interesting that some are just so much more advanced than others, and I don't know, something like that just fascinates me.
well, sure. Plus, the U.S. makes it a little more complicated because we have 50 states and 50
Mhm.
different jurisdictions with different laws, and a lot of them overlap, but and are similar, but there's a lot of differences too, and you can get caught in traps of one state's law versus another.
Sure. Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, that like something can be legal in a state, but if it's illegal at a federal level, you can run into issues based on whatever. Like, is that fair to say?
Yeah, like I guess one example yesterday being 420
Oh, yeah, fair,
uh,
yeah,
is that marijuana in some states has been approved with new legislation for recreational use, and that's what those particular states have decided, like Washington State, for example.
sure,
But at the federal level, it's still criminalized,
right,
and not only criminalized, but as the top notch, like along with cocaine as being uh, a big felony um, at the federal level, and so there's this complete disjunction between the two. So yeah, you can have a federal law that's at odds with state laws, and usually in the U.S. there's a deference to the states. So like if they decide they want to go one way, that's typically how things go. But with the current attorney general in the United States, it might not
okay.
go that way.
So does that make it kind of complicated for you guys sometimes when you guys are incorporating like a business kind of, it could be out like obviously outside of just maybe like if somebody's doing a startup, is there anything that they need to consider, you know, that maybe their state allows that maybe federally they is illegal?
I think the only time that would come up is if the kind of business they're conducting is illegal at the federal level.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
the example would be like if you had a pot store, if you
Okay,
or if you're cultivating marijuana or something like that. But I think for the 99% of 99.9% of businesses that aren't doing that, I don't really see that coming up
okay.
because yeah,
I've always
typically
kind
the
of wondered that, I guess, is kind of why I asked. It was more of a selfish question, I suppose, because I kind of assumed that it was just related to something like that. But if I was just kind of curious if there was anything kind of outside of that industry that people had to kind of worry about if they were looking to get in. But that makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious. You were just down in Stanford doing some talks. What was that kind of around, and why did they ask you to come down and speak?
yeah, so you're talking about Codex, which is at
Yeah.
Stanford Law School, and um, Susan Salkind and Roland Vogel head up that group,
Okay.
and it's it's basically dedicated to legal tech progress in the legal industry
Okay.
and kind of tracking it. And so they have people come down, they invite them to come down and present their technology or product or viewpoint about legal tech. And so I got invited to come down there and present LawDroid to them. And for me, it's a huge honor. I really respect what they're doing, and um, to have the invitation come from a group at Stanford Law School means that I'm doing something right. I
Sure,
hope.
sure. That's great though.
Uh, yeah, so I got to tell them a little bit about LawDroid, introduce them to it, and got some great questions afterwards and some interest. So that was a good experience. Not to mention that Stanford, like the campus, is just ridiculously
Sure.
beautiful. Um, Flying down from Vancouver, it was a rainy day in Vancouver, but I get down there and driving in, there's like rolling green hills and
Yeah,
white powder puff clouds, and it was just amazing.
yeah. It's definitely a beautiful area. If anybody hasn't been to that kind of Silicon Valley, San Francisco area, it's great. So I'm curious. You're also a part of, and well, co-founder of the Vancouver Legal Hackers. I know it's kind of a global organization, but what what is the Legal Hackers kind of organization, and what are you guys doing in Vancouver that is kind of unique and kind of different and kind of pushing the boundaries of legal technology?
Right. So Legal Hackers is an international organization based out of New York,
Okay.
and its aim is to come up with creative technological solutions to legal problems.
Okay.
And so the actual movement towards this started 4 or 5 years ago. I remember going to a few conferences back then where when nobody was
Sure,
was
sure.
was really interested or into this. It wasn't mainstream yet. Um, and from that came, this organization that wanted to formalize this kind of interest, and they call themselves legal hackers. And so there's chapters that have been popping up all over the United States and Canada and in Europe, um, Asia, and Africa. So there's groups all over, and this is their focus, is trying to create a better, more approachable legal industry, essentially.
Okay.
And in Vancouver, I founded. Well, I started and I brought in my co-founder Joshua Lennon, who works with Clio, and he's just the most charismatic, personable, and great guy. He's a great speaker and force of nature, really. And I'm doing my best when I speak to try to bring myself up to his level. Um, but he works at Clio, which is a startup out of Vancouver
Okay.
that does practice management for lawyers. And they've been very successful. They have a conference every year that's off the hook. There's like so many people that attend, and it's a very popular conference. Anyways, so I co-founded the group with Joshua Lennon and three other guys, uh, Mark, Brandon, and Eric, who are local Vancouver lawyers. Actually, Mark is in law school. But altogether, we created Vancouver Legal Hackers, and we've had about 5 meetings so far. Founded in November of just this past year, 2016.
Sure.
And at this point in April, we have over 400 members.
That's great, man.
Yeah, there's a huge interest in legal tech and where it's going. And what are we doing differently? I mean, I think we're just trying to bring people together. So it's not just a lawyer group, it's lawyers and developers.
Okay, interesting.
And trying to put those two different personality types and creative types into a room and help them to come up with something special is ultimately what we're aiming for.
No, I love that. I think that's great, right? And I think kind of more industries, I think, need to do what you guys are doing, because it sounds maybe kind of bad in some cases, but I think technology is moving into every industry. So, like, obviously you get that, and you're trying to create that instead of kind of get run over by that, right? And I think there's a lot of people that work in these industries that technology shows up and then they don't know what to do, right? And sometimes their business gets wiped out or just put online or whatnot, right? And instead of, you don't seem that worried about bringing technology into the legal space. You're actually trying to move the legal space forward by accepting and embracing and kind of building technology into the legal field.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, personally, I've never seen a conflict there. I know a lot of people do. To me, it's always been about, okay, this is the latest thing. Does it make sense to incorporate this or not? Does it make things better or does it make things worse, or we're just not sure yet?
Okay, interesting.
And so I've never really had an opposition to new technology. In fact, it's always, to me, presented an opportunity for what we can do better.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So obviously, like, you must get some pushback from other kind of attorneys and other people in the legal field. How's the hacker group kind of been accepted in the legal space?
Well, I guess from the amount of membership we've got, it's been accepted fairly well. I mean, I personally haven't dealt with the objection, but there's definitely some lawyers who think that this is very scary, what's happening right now.
Okay.
And they look at it and they see that there's all this talk about artificial intelligence and automation and losing jobs, and I wish I could say that those fears are completely unfounded,
Okay. Yeah.
and they're not entirely unfounded, because I mean, already there was one story, I think about a month ago, where JP Morgan engaged an AI company to assist them with automating some legal research and due diligence, I believe.
Okay.
And so this was work that would normally take, if it was one lawyer, okay, it would take the one lawyer, I think it was like 360,000 hours.
Oh, wow. That's insane. Yeah.
Yeah, so decades, right,
Yeah.
of work, which really means that they would have to hire an army of lawyers normally, which they, typically do. They hire an army of lawyers and paralegals that review all of this documentation. It takes them thousands and thousands of hours to review.
Sure.
And it takes a long time. But they employed this automation that was able to review it and got it done within, I think it was a few minutes,
Yeah, which is like unheard of, right? Like, which is,
Yeah,
yeah, okay, fair.
compared to, decades of work and employment for lawyers. And so the cost savings was insane.
Mm-hmm.
And JP Morgan obviously is very happy with that because they're, more efficient. They get to have things done and get an answer quickly, as opposed to having to wait for forever, or what seems like it when you're in the middle of a transaction. And it's a good result for them. Well, certainly that's going to lead to a job loss for lawyers doing reviews like that. Um, and so I think there is a fear there, but at the same time, I guess for me, like I said before, it's always presented an opportunity. Like whenever you have a crisis, whenever you have um, something that is new and different and is going to cause a lot of change, it's an opportunity to understand it and make it work for you. And so, I mean, my personal wish would be if more lawyers make it work for them, um, as opposed to just being fearful of it.
Sure. No, I 100% agree. But I think that's almost in any industry at some point, right? And just even history where it's just a matter of time before kind of the simpler tasks in any industry kind of get automated, whether it's by technology or AI or computers or something, right? Like it seems to be that's just the repeating pattern, right? And part of me also thinks that people need to figure out how to make themselves kind of invaluable, right? And not replaceable, or they need to kind of grow and potentially change to kind of accommodate the changing in their field, right? Because
Hmm.
if you look at, you think back like a decade, like the iPhone is just over a decade old. Like how far have we come in that decade, right? And
Just
you
can't
think,
live without it.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's only getting faster, right? Like the Facebook developer conference was this week, and they're talking about being able to like type with your mind and think with your mind. Like they're working on technology like this, right? So you think about that stuff, right? And it's coming, and it's only coming faster, right? And so to your point and kind of my point is like you need to figure out how to kind of embrace this for your industry, or you risk potentially getting wiped out by technology coming into your industry, right? And at least in your case and my case, we're trying to actually create that in the industry instead of trying to get run over by it.
Yeah, definitely. It's a challenge, and even right now, um, I think the challenge is that now there's so much interest in it. Um, it seems like everyone is coming up with some kind of AI or chatbot, and so at the recent Facebook conference, I think the figure was like 100,000 chatbots at this point
Sure.
within the span of 6 months, basically. So yeah, it's an interesting time. There's a lot of change going on, but I think it's best to just to keep moving forward and finding the best way to make it work for us.
Sure. So I'm curious then your thoughts on what advice do you kind of give younger or kind of lawyers that are in school and maybe a little bit worried about this? Like I know you kind of said embrace change, but like is there any other kind of advice that you kind of give all the time when asked that question?
Yeah, and actually, I, through Vancouver Legal Hackers, had an opportunity to speak at UBC, University of British Columbia Law School, and after the talk, one of the students had come up to me and asked that exact question,
Okay.
and that it requires a different mindset, like the mindset that I had when I went to law school, and I think a lot of law students still have, is that you're there to you know, to get out and get a good firm job,
Mm-hmm.
like to get that associate position at a law firm where you're going to stay on track, become a partner, and that's going to be success for you. And I think that what has happened over the past decade really is that has been completely broken open, and you have to not just consider other paths than that. um, you have to consider them. You have to look at, for example, like Joshua Lennon, right? He's working for Clio, which is a startup, and
Sure.
he's their quote unquote lawyer in residence. So he does a vast number of different things, but outreach to practicing lawyers is one of them.
Right.
He also comments on the state of the industry and does talks about where things are going. So that kind of um, attorney liaison for a startup is a type of position that's now available to law students to look into something like that. Or there's a lot of companies out there that are trying to wrap their heads around um, what this change in technology means for the law. And so a lot of companies are looking to hire people, hire lawyers that are familiar with this cross pollination between law and technology, and employing that in their business. So it might be, um, it might be that there's a Fortune 500 company that is employing chatbots and communicating with people, but they need to do things and make sure it's legal, and that they're not crossing lines depending on who they're talking to, and making sense of that and having it all be appropriate. That's something that they'll need uh, somebody to review legally for them, and so that's another kind of position that might be available. Um, and actually, going down the path of founding your own company in the legal tech space is another opportunity that wasn't really available before.
Sure.
So what I'm saying is that there's many different ways to go with a law degree, and it's not just the associate path. You
Sure.
have to consider these other paths, and some of them actually may be much more rewarding for law students, because up until now they've been stuck with the associate path, and it's been regarded as a fairly high stress option.
Right. No,
you
fair.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, for a lot of people.
No, I think that's actually really good. And like, and I would put yourself in this category. Like, yeah, you're a lawyer, but you're also a founder. You're also an entrepreneur. You're building your own startups, right? And
Right.
you may do that full time, part time, as a side project. But I think it's important, like people like yourself, to mention that to younger kind of people coming up. There's in some ways, and I don't have this skill set, but I think like I did have a I wish I did have a better understanding of kind of the legal and kind of accounting side of business, right? So having being a founder and having kind of a legal background will never hurt you, right? You might not just actually do law for other people all day long or be an attorney, but if you understand the law and you found a company, whether it's in the law space or not, is immensely valuable.
Definitely. And I think what's happening to the law degree is what has happened, decades ago to an MBA.
Sure.
You know, like you would get your MBA, and you wouldn't necessarily be gunning solely for the C-level suite. Yes, you would hope for that,
Sure.
but basically it's a general um, business education and credibility that you would get that would serve you well in a number of different types of positions within business. And I think that a law degree is basically becoming that with for business, but having a legal twist to it, so that it just generally qualifies somebody um, to be, to have a legal perspective in business. So there's many more opportunities than just the narrow one that's been available today.
No, I think that's great. But sadly, Tom, we're running out of time. So maybe let's close the show with mentioning where people can get more information about yourself, LawDroid, and if they want to check out the Vancouver Legal Hackers or the other chapters across the globe?
Yeah, definitely. So for legal hackers, definitely visit Meetup, and go on to meetup.com and just type in legal hackers, and you will definitely find your local group if there is one.
Sure.
And if not, just check out the Legal Hackers website, and you can actually start up your own local chapter if you want.
That's great.
As for LawDroid, you could follow me at LawDroid1 on Twitter.
Okay.
And the website is just lawdroid.com. And so you can check out a number of blog articles about how to improve your business profitability and automation, and also give LawDroid a spin and check it out if you need to incorporate.
Perfect, Tom. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day.
You too, Kevin. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check them out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.